Welcome to Enjoy Nature, where I bring you along on my adventures and share the sights with you in the hopes that it will inspire you to also get out there and enjoy nature. So one of the things that I want to do with this channel is to not only share the beauty of nature with you, but also teach, to give just some very basic instruction on things like how to build a fire, how to make a tinder bundle, how to make fire with flint and steel, and also get into some other bushcrafting and wilderness survival topics, but nothing too in-depth. But I just want to share some of the basics with you. So what I'd like to do today in this video is just give a real basic instruction on how to do a simple fire lay that will work effectively at a campground in a fire ring, and also how to build a tinder bundle and how to start that from flint and steel. And this is a nice place to start, just a simple way to practice your skills. So before I start any sort of fire, I always like to make sure I have a good fire lay going first before I even start with building a tinder bundle or anything like that. So I've got all my tinder bundle material here. Got my little fire bag, and then grass, inner bark from cottonwood, tiny bit of birch bark that I brought with me, and some leaves. And so we should be able to make a pretty good tinder bundle out of that. I find building a really good tinder bundle is the key to getting a good fire going with ease. If you master that skill, then you can start fires in all sorts of situations. So first, let's get going on that fire lay. So unfortunately, we have one of these standard rings to work with. Not my favorite. So I think I'll do just a really simple lean-to. They're usually fairly easy to just use the side wall and get a fire going that way. So I've got a nice selection of wood, different sizes. You want to think of the concept of ladder fuels. You want to start with small pieces and then work your way up. And each piece will light the bigger piece on fire and help that fire to build a lot more quickly. If you're not using ladder fuel, it's trying to start a log on fire with like lighter fluid, and that just doesn't work very well. You can spray it and spray it and spray it, but it's hard to go from that light flashy fuel to start a big heavy fuel on fire. So if you have transition pieces, you can build up to eventually burning that big log. So I like to start with what's left over, put some coals down, and then we'll put down some tinder. We use what's available to us. And that'll just give us a good base to start with. And on top of that, then we can start with our smaller stuff. And like I said, we're just going to do a lean-to. So we're just going to lay stuff up against the side here. And we'll want to hold back a nice little bundle of each size so that we can have something to work with when we close up the door that we're going to make here. So I want to create a little space here for this tinder bundle to go, build up some fuel around it, and then on top of it ideally as well. And we want to think of where that heat is going to go and how we can trap that heat in there. So much like a shelter door, we can just use a cross piece and give us a little spot to put a little bit more fuel up on top, because this wall will act like a chimney,
and will really pull that heat up. So we want plenty of fuel on the sides, but that heat is going to go up, and we can capture that energy and ability to do work by putting that right in there. And this is not too elaborate or too fancy or anything, but trying to think of leaving room for airflow too. You don't want to close your fire off. Was up at 10,000 feet one time, and we had a hell of a time getting a fire going because there was just no oxygen. So once we took half the wood off the fire, it started right up. Small stuff, some stuff to close the door here. This is a pretty minimal amount of wood here for a fire lay, but shouldn't have too much trouble getting this going today. Alright, so we've got kind of just a nice little, almost like a little animal's den in there. Nice little home for our fire to go in once we get it, get the tinder bundle made and get that going. But I always like to do my fire lay first. Alright, so I've got the other materials here. First, this birch bark. We'll shred that into just very, very fine pieces. I like to give as much surface area as possible for that. Maybe save that one. It's nice and quiet out here. You just hear the squirrels and a few birds. Nice, peaceful day. Alright, that's looking pretty good. We can fluff it up a little bit here. Try to, without losing it. Okay. We'll set that just off to the side. And I like grass because it lends itself to making a little nest. So you can try to just make something literally resembling a nest, and you can keep putting the stuff back in. So that's going to be the outside of our nest. We want something that's going to be good size. So then, let me see, not too bad. You can hold material to your lip. Obviously you don't want your lip to be all wet, but if you kind of hold, like roll your lip back, and if it feels cool, that means it's got moisture in it. You're feeling the moisture evaporating. So this is just slightly damp, but hopefully the heat from, because even if you've got damp materials and you're out in right after a rain or in a rain, you can still get a fire going, even with damp tinder. But you have to account for it, and you have to give the tinder bundle enough good dry material that it can dry out the next layer of material and then burn that and use that to burn out the next layer. So that's the trick to working with tinder like that. And working in damp conditions. So I just kind of fluff that up. We want lots, again, fire needs air, it needs fuel, and it needs heat or an ignition source. And so we want to not crush everything together and take the air out of it. It needs air, it needs space. And so I like to get a big bulk of a tinder bundle going, and that could have 2-3 times as much grass on it, but we'll see if we can get it going with just this today. And so I've got my multi-layered outer tinder bundle, and then I like to give more care to the inner part. Really ball that up, pull it out. Starting to get pretty good. Just really trying to break those fibers up. There, that's looking pretty good. And in that, then I like to mix and intersperse the birch, so that once this cottonwood gets going, it'll catch these tiny little pieces of birch, because birch starts better from a flame than it does from a coal. So as soon as we get a little bit of flame, the birch will catch, and the birch will just go crazy. It's got these little oils in it, and even completely wet, maybe we'll do that later, even completely wet, a piece of birch bark will burn. So pretty fascinating stuff. So the closer I am to the center, the finer the material I want. Something that's really that paper thin birch. And normally I would do this with a bow drill, but I'm a little bit limited with my shoulder right now, so I have to be careful. That little bit of sawing was about all I could handle. Not could handle, but should do right now. Trying to give my body a rest. But doctor's permission to be out here, so thank God for that. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Now let's get to the next part here, getting some materials ready and actually getting this going. I think, yeah, so this, I like to use something bright, red or orange for my fire bag. Just kind of makes sense. And lots of, this is actually fishing stuff, so, but jute twine, and then some candles, and then just different types of tinder. Again, like I said, birch bark, and got a fun little one of different paper and birch bark and just different types of tinder materials, all in little bags, which I think are taped closed inside of another bag, inside of another bag, inside of another dry bag. So redundancy is key, because you're bound to lose one of your layers of protection, especially when it comes to waterproof stuff out in the woods. So, all right. So this is my version of flint and steel. Just something really simple. I think I have a big rod though. Yep. And then I've got in here, wrapped in paper towel, just so it doesn't clank around and make a bunch of noise. That's where I've got, so I have redundancy again. I've got the big striker, and then I've got one of those magnesium ferro rods. But I think today I want to show you char cloth. Char cloth is really the magic behind flint and steel. Now you can see people with larger ferro rods or ones that are twice as long and probably 2 or 3 times as big in diameter. And those will throw off such a big chunk of steel that you could just start this on fire. And that's perfectly valid. It's a great tool to have, but for people that see that and then they run out and with their allowance they buy one of these because that's all the money they have, and then they're frustrated that this tiny little ferro rod is not able to get a fire started the same way that something 3 times the size of this can. So for that reason, I want to show char cloth, because char cloth is really the magic and the trick to using this type of ferro rod. And it's a good skill to know because you don't have to have even a metal tin. This is just old shoe polish tin. And notice it doesn't have any holes in it. It's going to get it. The idea of putting it in here is to cut the oxygen off, so you don't want it to breathe, and you're never going to get a good seal anyway. But to the char cloth, so you don't need that much, but we'll use a decent amount so we can get a good coal. We got plenty to work with. So I'm going to actually sort of tuck this down in a little bit, make sure it's got some birch bark ready at hand. And it's always good to keep things closed up and cleaned up as much as you can. That way you know where stuff is. You don't want to be that person in a loan who lost his ferro rod and bowed out. So there's a lot of ways to go. Mother Nature does not play favorites or play nice just because you're having a bad day. So you really need to know what you're doing. So, so hopefully I can get a fire going now after all that. But yeah, so what the plan is that you just lay a spark right in here, and then I'm going to put this stuff back in my bag so I know where it's at. And then I will kind of fold this up and then put it in the fire lay and then get the door closed. So let's see how this works here. Not a very good striker here. Maybe we'll try the teeth side. There we go, we nailed it. You can see already that we've got some spark going. Got some coals. So I'll try to close that up. We want to try to fold that into the center without anything crushing the coal. And we got a little breeze, so I can just let Mother Nature do it here too. Just watch that smoke out the back. And this is where I like to say heat, not just ignition source. Right now, there's a little bit of moisture in there, so that we need to let the heat build and dry that out. And if I keep blowing on it, it's just going to blow all the heat out. I had a job where we didn't get the contract to do the restoration work, but we got the contract to do the burning, which the other company didn't have. So our job was to go around burning up piles of green trees the size of this huge one here and 2-3 times bigger. and we had a propane tank and a blowtorch for it, and these huge logs, and a leaf blower. And we had a heck of a time because we could put the fire on the wood and then put that leaf blower in there, but we were just blowing all the heat out. So you don't want to overblow on your tinder bundle and blow all that heat away, especially when it's doing work drying out that tinder. Yeah, that cottonwood was pretty damp. Not pretty damp, but decently damp, so. There we go. Sometimes rotating the tinder bundle and letting that heat come through a different spot. You have to imagine that coal in there is burning, and it might burn up through tinder, and if you flip it, that coal can have new material to go into. There, we're getting some heat going. See, when I moved it, I crushed that coal a little bit. It was just getting going good. So this is where, honestly, I prefer fire by friction, because the size of coal that you get is quite a bit more substantial. And that heat from that much bigger coal gives you a lot more heat to start with inside your tinder bundle. And that just accelerates the process of the whole thing. But it looks like if I just don't mess with it and give it a sec here, we're starting to get somewhere. This is not a good place to take your city mindset of everything must be now and quick, fast, fast, fast. It pays to take the time to do things right, and honestly, I rushed things. I didn't spend a whole lot of time gathering this material and making sure it's quality and dryness, and so obviously I'm paying for that now with all the time it's taking to dry up this tinder bundle. But I think we'll get there. Ooh, yeah. There we go. Get that in there, grab some leaves quick. I should have had these ready to go, my mistake. Extra tinder to add to the flame. I don't want to just throw it all on there because it will choke it out, so I'll hold it in front with some airspace till it starts to catch. I can throw on those little sticks and start to close up the door here. And the trick now is to get this wood going before that tinder burns out. It's looking pretty good. Yeah. So that worked out just fine. Oh, closed it off too much there. See that fire tamp down right away. Don't want to choke it out. And when you're first going, it doesn't hurt if you got other small pieces around to take and stick them in. Try to refeed that base, because as the wood burns out, they'll collapse, and then the bigger pieces will hide that. It can build a cavity, and then there's too much space between the coals and those bigger branches. So you can kind of break your strategy of laying stuff on and occasionally stick a piece in. And I'm putting that good thin piece in there to help. That'll catch quick. And that's that light cottonwood, so it'll burn well. But yeah, that is my little strategy. Yeah, she's going good now. So for me, that's just a minimum where I like to start. What I like to do just for the basics. I could just use a lighter, and I could just bring paper towels, but learning how and practicing a tinder bundle is a really, really good thing that you can do all the time. And that way, when you get into fire by friction, having already practiced building a good fire lay, having already practiced working from a small, tiny coal that you get from this method that I just showed you, then when you do get to the point where you're practicing your fire by friction and you do get that first coal, you don't go through that frustration of losing your first coal from fire by friction and not getting to turn that into a fire. You don't lose that because you didn't practice your fire lay, you didn't practice going from a coal to a fire using a tinder bundle that you built yourself. When you practice all these things, take the skills and break it down into pieces, and you can practice the pieces. And then when you put it all together, things will go a lot more smoothly.
Thank you for joining me for this journey today. It is a joy to share my love of nature with you. I hope it has inspired you to, in whatever way you can, big or small, get out there and enjoy nature.